Welcome. I'm Julie Bacon, and you're listening to the Mindset Coaching for Handlers podcast, a podcast for dog handlers who are on a mission to achieve big goals. Here I share lessons, insights, personal stories, and tools you can apply during your next show, trial, or test to help you strengthen your mental game and hopefully cue more consistently. Be sure to check out the show notes where you'll find details about the episodes, plus important links, including the link to the Dogged Planner and Workbook created just for handlers on a mission. So if you're ready to improve your competitive mindset, get out of your own way, and connect with your dog like never before, then it's time to get comfy, bring an open mind, and work your mindset. Hey there, and welcome back to the podcast. You know how important I think it is to take a break once in a while, so I am taking my own advice. I am on a break between season 3 and season 4, which will start back in January, but I didn't want to leave you without mindset support for the month of December. So I want you to enjoy some of the most popular podcasts from this season, and I hope they will help you to continue to work on your mindset skills throughout the holidays. I look forward to being back with all new episodes in January. All right, welcome everybody. I am here with Beth, who wrote The Human Herd, and we've been talking about this book for a while, and I'm just so excited and grateful to be talking to you, Beth. So thank you for talking to us, and I will let you introduce your wonderful self.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you for having me on your podcast. So I am Beth Anstandig, and I am a therapist, a leadership and culture consultant. I work with individuals and families and groups in the capacity of doing some therapy, but most of the work that I do now is with people around workplace relationships and helping work teams and also larger organizational projects so that people can design and train and really get their workplace groups up and running with a culture that leads to more health and has a mental health focus. And I'm a writer, and my background's in poetry, but I do a lot of different kinds of writing, and I wrote the book, The Human Herd, based on the model that I use in working with people. And that's called natural leadership. And I incorporate in my work with people all of the phenomena and concepts and skills that I've learned with my animals. And I integrate human psychology with mammal life in a way that helps people think of themselves and how they take care of themselves and their relationships a little differently. And sometimes I find actually it's a simpler approach than the sophisticated ways that humans can sometimes
complicate things.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So
yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, I loved your book. I think it has so many applications. My group, as you know, is dog handlers, and most of us are out there competing in all different types of venues and taking our dogs and driving around and all of this kind of stuff, and are very serious and competitive about it, and just want to always figure out how we can get better.
Right.
And from the opening introduction, I guess, where you talk about settling in, I just thought that was a great place to start, not only because you started the book there, but also just because we're always asking our dogs to go to different places and perform as if they were at home, or perform in these different places. And the whole concept of like settling in just like really hit me fast. And I'm even going to like fangirl for a second and read like a phrase, because there was one little phrase that, I mean, there was a lot of phrases, but there's one phrase that got me in particular that was, "The doorway bursts at the seams, not with people, but with pressure." Yeah. And I always think of like the energy of the places that we walk into, and it's not just our own energy that we're bringing and how we can settle in, but like the energy of the building, the pressure of the building, the pressure of the competition, and how that changes. So massive introduction, but just like jump in wherever to that conversation you want to start, because I think it's all really helpful for us.
Thank you. So the concept of settling in and that term actually came from my daughter, and I tell the story of it in the introduction to the book to help people settle into the book, but also to introduce a very primary way that we take care of ourselves or don't take care of ourselves in the human world. And children and animals show us this. And my daughter, when she was about 3 going on 4, explained this to me and put some words to something that I had been experiencing forever. And it was about transitioning into a new space and going to a fancy party and feeling as we walked into the room that we were transitioning from our little world, had gone through the world in a car, gone into a new place, and it was this place full of people. And she reacted to it appropriately and normally, and having a very authentic, unfiltered response, which was like, this is too much for me. I need a minute. And she
Yeah.
said, I need a minute to settle in. And I was so grateful in that moment to be aware and present enough with myself to hear it and listen and ask myself, like, what is that? What's happening? Which is a really important question, and how we settle in, like, what's going on with me right now in
Right.
this space. And I got down at her level and looked around and felt it. And it was like, oh, this is the source of social anxiety right here. Like
Right.
because we skip past the transition.
Yeah.
We don't allow just the mammal part of us that needs to orient and breathe and find like a place where our nervous system can resettle itself, which it will do if we give it the opportunity. And instead we go in and we start talking and interacting and thinking, and this whole part of us, this neural network and the body and all of the impact of stress hormones and chemicals is just, going wild. It's just flooded. And we're out there pretending to function. And I'm like, how
Right.
often do we do this every day where we're
Yeah.
transitioning from one thing to another and we don't give ourselves even a minute? It wasn't like we needed. That's what I have found as I've been really studying this phenomenon of settling in and teaching it and practicing it. You get really efficient at it and you don't need a
hmm
long time, but we do need a minute to just look around and breathe before performing
Right.
or relating or doing any kind of complex thinking or communicating. We actually just have to settle into ourselves in this space. So with the animals, I have found, as a dog person myself, and I was saying earlier that I've been doing sheep herding, mostly sheep herding, some agility, but mostly sheep herding for 30 years with my border collies. And so
hmm
I've taken them into all kinds of environments all over the country, and clinics and competition and different training fields, and then just living with them and doing things with them out in
Sure.
the world, also with my horses, and then watching it with children. And I'm so grateful to the animals and kids for being so open and honest about how they experience pressure in the world when we don't give them a chance to settle in, so
Yeah.
that I could see it and then try to communicate to humans, like, let's step back and look at this as an essential need. Because that's really what we're
So
talking about. It's not a luxury, it's an essential need.
right. So your daughter, it sounds like, kind of gave you the vocabulary. Like you
Yes.
knew it in your body, but you didn't have the vocabulary
Yeah.
around it. And so then how did you link that to like observation of your animals? Or were you already doing that naturally? And again, you just needed the vocabulary. Like how
It
did
was a
that?
little bit of both. I
Okay.
think it was a little bit of both. Like, I think I was doing it. I've always listened to my animals and looked to them. Like, rather than thinking of like, how can I help them? I start with like, what's happening with us. So I'm
Okay.
on an equal playing field when we go into a new space, for instance. How are we? Like, how am I? How are you? How are we? And what's going on around us? So
Okay.
I'm not the guide. I mean,
I
I will step into
love it.
leadership, but like, they're going to give me feedback about the world that I'm not seeing because we're a herd or we're a pack. And
Right.
so I'm not dominant in terms of awareness. and communication of needs. I might play a leadership role at times, and I'm committed to being an awareness leader with them, but they're going to give me information that I don't have. So I value their feedback about what they're experiencing just as much as I value my own. So
Wow. I
I've
think that's
been
so
doing that
powerful.
forever. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's so powerful. It's a gift that you naturally do that. But I think that, so often as the human species, we feel the obligation maybe or pressure to be in charge, have all the answers, know the thing, do the thing, and do that. And I the way you're phrasing it, it's like, yes, you step into leadership, but you're a partner and you're on equal footing. And I don't think that we think about that. Like, I just think we
Right.
think we're obligated, or like we should, all these shoulds, we should know, we should be able to do this, we should be able to handle all this or whatever. And I just don't think that we give ourselves permission to not know, or to be equal, or to be like, oof, like, I don't know what's happening. Like, tell me, give me something.
Well, the thinking brain and living in many generations of like hierarchical world where we've been implicitly or explicitly taught that we are smarter than animals because we have a
Yep.
thinking brain, puts us in a position where we unconsciously act that way with them. What's interesting is that when we're missing all these signals of what's actually going on, the animal is, they don't trust us
Mm,
as leaders because we're not
mm,
actually showing up in as good pack members. So we're sitting there thinking
interesting.
that we know best and we're in charge. And they're thinking, why is this person missing all these signals of what's going on and not taking care of themselves, me, or us? And so if you look at like, why are animals not accepting our leadership? It's because it's got a major flaw. And it's
Wow.
thinking
Yeah.
that we're better than, and therefore we know, like we've got the whole situation handled. But this overemphasis on just the thinking brain, and it has, basically we've got all these blind spots that the animals don't
Right.
have there. And so if we can listen to them and listen to their feedback, it's incredible how quickly they want to join up with us and partner, and they see us as a viable pack member. So if you just thought about it as like another dog, for instance, and we'll talk about it a lot
Okay.
with dogs, because that's your listenership and
Sure.
your lens.
Yep.
But if there was a member of the pack that was not picking up on legitimate cues within the pack of what was needed, like let's say it's like thundering and the dog and this one animal is just out there like running around, and there's like lightning going on and there's hail, and the rest of the pack is starting to hunker down, and this one member is just gone rogue, that
Hmm.
pack would start to be concerned that there's something wrong with that member because they're not taking the cues of the others, that like the environment has told us that we should take shelter and you're
Right.
not doing that. And so I'm not sure I can trust you. And ultimately, if they kept doing things like that, they would probably reject that member because
Yep.
it's not safe.
Yeah. And I'm thinking of like all the anxiety from the animal that has to come up when you're like kind of stuck in this
Yeah.
environment. I mean, I don't want to say stuck with your
Yes.
handler who's not taking the
No,
cues, but
that's what it
in a
is.
sense, they're sort of stuck with this person, this woman who's like not getting it.
Yeah. They're like,
And then
wow,
now they feel like they're unsafe, or they feel like they can't trust, or whatever. I mean, that we have all these like behavior in dogs, right? Again,
yeah,
that we're trying to like control or change or whatever from the outside,
right.
and with these older methods. And it's just amazing that like, perhaps the source is,
Oh, for
you know,
sure. Well, there's root causes of what their behavior is a signal. It's trying to tell us that something needs adjusting and we're not listening to it. So the
right.
behavior escalates. And because their survival, they're so committed to their survival that they're not going to stuff the expression of needs, whereas we do as humans. And that's
Right.
how we end
Right.
up with stress disease, because we're just stuffing the signaling of needs.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it's so interesting because you know, we basically have this it's a dominance approach, which is really interesting because true dominance approach is about holding awareness. I will hold awareness so you can rest.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
I will hold space so your nervous system can breathe and be at ease. But what we're saying, I'm dominant, but I'm going to miss all the cues. And I
Right.
need you to accept me as dominant. And they're like, well, I
Right.
can't
And
rest
then also
because
do everything I ask you to do perfectly.
and be an athlete.
Right.
Right. Like
Yeah.
now, I mean,
Run really fast.
yeah, run really fast, listen to all my cues, but I'm already not believing that your cues are viable and smart for me. And
Yeah.
so the anxiety is a core anxiety for them. They're worried about their survival. And the approach that natural leadership takes is that whatever signs and symptoms are coming up are our wise survival system trying to tell us an actual need, an essential need. And if we can listen to it and attend to that need, then that sign and signal, that symptom or that behavior can quiet down. The nervous system can go back to a homeostasis. And so it's not that something's wrong. And that's another thing that we do. We're like, oh, what's wrong with my dog?
Well,
Like,
I
well,
was just
what's
also
right with your
thinking,
dog?
yeah, your dog, right. And I was just thinking of like, at this point, my listeners are like, oh my God, the guilt, right? Now they're
Oh,
all feeling like, oh my God, I'm not doing the right
I
thing. I'm a
know.
bad mom. I'm a bad whatever. So like, go there too. Like, how is that? Like, how do we not feel bad? Like, how? Yeah. Because
Or
then we
it's,
spiral, right? We want to do
yeah.
all the things like, oh my God, my dog has this problem. Oh my God, I'm the problem. Oh my God, now what? You know what I mean?
I am the problem because I created it by not listening to my dog. And I mean, I've been in that boat as a parent. I've been in that boat as a horse person with my
Yeah.
horses. I've been in that boat with the dogs. I just moved from California to Maine. And so I'm in this
Massive.
settling in process, and I'm on a 900-acre farm,
Oh my
like
God, that's just dreamy.
5 miles from the coast. It's like a completely new land. And I moved here with my daughter. I'm with my partner and his 5 kids. And then I
Oh,
moved my dogs and my horses. And so talk
oh my
about
God.
settling in, right? And I've noticed that, there's so much transition and so many moving parts that the settling in takes a while. And so just to that question around like the guilt or whatever shame that we feel, like I've had to use my own settling in concept and practice every day, all day since April. And I've done
Wow.
it imperfectly where I'm like,
Yeah.
and I'll step back and the magic question of kind of settling in is like slowing down and stopping and looking around enough so that you can ask yourself the question, what's happening right now?
Yeah.
And I've been sucked into this move process so that like I'm busily doing things and then not asking the question, and then find
Right.
myself with holding a lot of pressure. And then that's really not been good for myself or any of the mammals around.
Anybody.
Yeah. So it's
Right.
happened a bunch of times since the move. And, we can go into shame about it and like guilt or whatever, or what I often say to myself when I notice that it's happened is like, well, thank goodness I'm noticing it now.
Exactly. Correct.
And,
Yeah.
and this is like, how many generations of human evolution have we gotten far enough away from really just taking care of ourselves as mammals, but being these sophisticated thinkers and intellectuals and learn,
Yeah.
like how we have many layers and generations of buying into thinking as
Right.
the like
Right.
that's the thing that's going to solve all problems is human thought. And so I just try to like graciously look at, in this moment, I'm very grateful that I do know how to listen to my mammal self.
Mm-hmm.
And every time I'm able to notice and attend to it, I'm reinforcing that as a new way. So And I think that shame piece or that guilt piece, it's going to confuse the animals or other humans or children, around
Yeah,
us
for
even more.
sure.
Like they don't know
Right. It just
like,
doesn't do any good,
no, it doesn't do any
right?
good.
It
No,
doesn't do any good. I do think what is valuable though is a little self-forgiveness, which can be really
definitely.
hard.
Yes.
But as we're going through the process to just, you can't, you have to forgive yourself for the stuff you didn't know. Like if you
Yeah.
once you know, then you can apply it. But if you don't know it, like you don't know
You
it.
don't
Like
know.
how can you feel bad
I
for that?
know. And whenever I get a signal from like another, it is usually from the kids or animals, less so from adult humans, because we're just either they're numbed out in their own thinking
Yeah.
process or busyness, or they don't know how to signal and give feedback in that human herd environment of like, hey, we're not
Right.
okay. Let's just take a minute. We don't have great vocabulary or skills for that in our groups.
Yep.
So I usually get the signals from myself, from the animals, or from kids. And to get into that, like that more of a gracious mindset around it or self-forgiveness, I just try to go to gratitude where I'm like, thank you to the dog or the
Yep.
horse or the child. Thank you for telling me what and showing me that. And like, it also it quiets the pride. Cause I think
Oh, yeah.
the
Yeah.
guilt
Yeah.
part is about pride. It's about, my ego doesn't like that I was wrong.
Yeah. Or that I don't know the answer.
Yeah. Yeah. It doesn't like that I had to be told by the environment or someone else that something was needed. I want to just know. And so every time I can say like, thank you. And sometimes I'm sorry to myself and to us that I was not noticing that sooner. Like that,
Mm-hmm.
it just kind of quiets that inflamed pride piece, which like the
Mm-hmm.
ego needs some tempering. It's good for us to just be a mammal among mammals.
Yeah, the word I got hooked on last year is curiosity,
Yeah.
And so it speaks to your like asking why or asking or observing what's going on,
Yeah.
just in that like you just give yourself a moment not to have the answer and just be curious about what actually is happening going on and just what are you observing or listening to.
Right. Right. It's just
But I think that it's
not knowing.
frustrating.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think it's frustrating not knowing, or maybe not knowing how to read your dog. Like, how did you get to that point where you were reading the animals better? Like, did you ever like misread something and you thought it was this and it wasn't, or, like, how do we get better at reading our dogs?
Well, this part's where I sometimes when I answer a question like this, I'm like, somebody's going to call me up and be like, you are simplifying something way more complex than this. But like, I actually I'm starting to wonder if I'm like, no, it really is this simple. Like the nervous system, as complex as it is, we're really just looking at like states of arousal. We're looking at like, how is it regulated or dysregulated, and where on the scale is it? And if you think about it like that, and that homeostasis and a space of ease is this dynamic place in the middle where we're always kind of we're adjusting ourselves all day, every day to try to be in a place where we're not overusing energy in order
Ooh,
to survive.
okay. Yeah.
And so if you just think about, and that's why I study pressure as a phenomenon, like not good or bad, but just, is there enough pressure that it's keeping your blood flow going and you're alive and functioning, but not so much that you're flooding your system and about to stroke out? Right.
Right.
Like, and so
Right.
you
Right.
don't want
Right.
to like have no heartbeat, but you also don't want to be having aneurysms or heart
Right.
attacks, right? So
Yes.
somewhere in the middle is a
Preferably.
homeostatic state of ease that I've learned in this like rest and digest state with horses where they're just grazing. Like they're just naturally flowing through the world, and nothing's in the way of them taking care of their needs. They lay down if they
Okay.
need to, they get up if they need to, they move if they need to. They're just attending to needs. And so if we simplify that, and instead of analyzing and putting a lot of names and labels on behavior, and just look at it as like, where are you in the pressure continuum? What are you observing in your dog around energy? And does it look like it's dysregulated? Does it look like they're shut down, or does it look like they're flooded, or does it look like they're somewhere in the middle in a state of ease? And like, what does it feel like in your nervous system? Because you don't have to have studied. You can observe any mammal and your system knows how to read another nervous system.
Right, because that's sort of embedded in us.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so instead of thinking that you don't know, this is where it's like, no, you do know. Like
we don't trust ourselves, maybe.
We don't trust ourselves. We were just talking about all the ways that we don't know, right?
Yeah.
Now we're talking about something that we actually do know. This is like a wise part of us that's totally intact, that can read whether another mammal is at ease or not.
Well, and it's so funny because we always kind of brag about, I guess, that the fact that how connected we are to our animals and how they love us and how on all of this kind of stuff. And then, but all of a sudden there's this huge part of like their performance that we can't read. Like that doesn't make sense. Like that literally is illogical.
Yeah, it's illogical. Yeah. And so if you slow it down, and this is, I'll just give you kind of an example of what it might look like with a dog and a handler. So let's say like in your world, you've driven 4 hours to go to it's like a clinic, or, it's a competition, and it's bustling with energy. And like you bustled with energy to get out of the house and get your animals ready, and hurried to wait to be like locked up in a car. And then, right. And then you've driven all this time, and whatever stress that's caused, and however much you've had to hold pressure in your body, then you get to the place and everyone else who's there went through the same thing to get there. And there's all this pressure about trying to get that event, whatever it is, up and running. And there's cross species mingling who don't know each other. So, so we do not feel safe because we're not. Like, are these friends? And for the dogs and the people, our nervous system is evaluating life or death, friend or foe. Like, what am I about to be eaten? Is this safe? Like, who is safe here? Is this a safe place? How do I get my needs met? How am I going to find safety? And who are my people? That's what our system is designed to do when we go to a new place. And so then our dog starts like growling at others, or putting its hackles up, or lunging, or barking, or pulling at the leash, like some of the behaviors that you'll see. Or they're super shut down and shaking and trembling, and like they won't move, like you're trying to walk and they won't move, or so they're like they're exhibiting signs that something is out of balance. It's not wrong, it's out of balance. There's a need not being met. And so, and then we start to try to control it and shut it down. If we were to just stop and imagine that you're watching the film of what's happening. You and your dog are and you step back, and literally step back, like get some scope, go to the edge of the system, the entrance, and stop and observe and breathe. And you don't grab a hold of the leash, you hold it gently, because it's a place, like it is like an umbilical cord between your nervous systems. And you breathe, and you just observe your dog, observe yourself, put less focus on what's going on with the dog, but like what's happening within me. How am I right now? What's happening with my dog? What do I see between us? How are we as a pack? And what's going on around us? You'll see immediately your pressure start to quiet, and your animal, every time. And so it's the trying to shut it down that gets us into trouble, and call it that like something's behaviorally wrong, versus it's asking us to pay attention. That's what signals do. They're saying, hey, there's a need. So ignoring it or shutting it down doesn't address the need.
It's so interesting because I developed this I call it a ritual, and I try to teach it as a ritual. And the reason I use that word is because I need to protect it fiercely, right? So that just felt like,
Yes.
it's beyond a habit. It just became something I needed to protect.
Yes.
And that is when I get to any new place, I leave the dogs in the car and I go get myself organized first. Right. Because I used to just me and the dog run into this brand new place and both of us are like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God.
Yeah.
And so I was like, well, okay, that didn't work. And so I came to this by trial and error, but on some point I was listening and paying attention, right, to my dog and the results I was getting, right. I was probably more results focused, but at least I was experimenting with, well, how do I get us both comfortable? And so then from there, once I'm settled in, then we both go for a walk because we're both releasing some kinetic stored energy from, like you said, the drive or whatever.
Yeah.
And then I try to let my dog have take them in the building or the environment and what they're going to see so that they can start to be like, oh, this is what we're doing.
Beautiful.
And my first dog and now one of my current dogs just would offer a down whenever they were done. And they would just lie down and they would look at me and they'd be like, I got it. And I'd be like, okay. And then my words are, I sort of release the pressure and I take them back out to the car and I let them settle in the car.
Yeah.
And so this is something I came up with, and it goes on a little bit more in terms of how I then get them out and get them ready to walk into the ring. But I'm always preaching, because that's such a soapbox for me, of like coming up with a ritual that works for our dog, along with the fact that I really like to have my dogs crate in the car because I believe they settle and they actually sleep, even though they might be quiet and stuff in the ring in a crate and they're behaving, whatever that looks like. I learned from my own dog. My first dog is first competition dog that, he was quiet, but he never settled.
Yeah.
And by the end of the day, he was like vibrating because he just didn't know how to process the day, even though he was being this perfect little angel in a crate in the corner. Like I thought he was fine.
He wasn't resting,
but he wasn't fine. He wasn't resting at all.
Yeah. We have to have rest, and there's no way for the nervous system to rest in that environment. I mean, in what you just described, that is a settling in ritual. And the only thing that I would add to it is making sure that you're settling in and getting the lay of the land for yourself. There's still this like agenda of like, for my dogs.
Yes.
And so, and this is like a handler piece, because it's like always for my dog or for my kid or for whoever, like my direct reports or whoever it is.
Sure. Because we prioritize others.
Yes. And what I would say is that your leadership and others' acceptance of it is completely dependent on you having a radical ritual of self. Like radical self-care is about like, as a pack leader, I am going to be most trusted if what they see me do is radically take care of myself. And so I would go in and get the lay of the land until I had an internal down within me.
Yeah.
And then the walkabout is like, well, it's not just about for the dog. It's like, what do we need? And so what are the rituals that I do? Like one of the things that I do is photography, and it's very soothing for me. And I could go into that for a whole, like 15 minutes of why it's a good settling in practice and ritual for me, because of all the different parts of myself that it reaches. But even in that environment, I would take a while to go settle in, check in, look around, but then also like take even longer than I would think so that I can really deeply settle into myself, and then add the dog, and then make sure that it's like, I see their internal down, but do I have it yet? Because sometimes once you add the dog, we're in taking mode.
Yes. Yeah.
And I'm like,
oh my
I'm
God.
just looking for you to lie down, but I haven't released yet.
Right. I haven't lied down mentally.
Yeah. And so like, and you can tell if you just check in with like the tension in your body, like, are you still gripping something? Are you still like can you lay down when your dog lays down? Could you sit down with them? And if the answer is
Well,
no, then you're not settled in yet either.
right. You're not. And the other thing that I think is it's bringing up for me personally is that like one of my dogs, when she walked into an environment not too long ago, she gave some of those like nervous signals, right? She started to yawn. She was like, you could see her go, uh-oh, you could see her start to get stressed. And immediately I went into the two things happened that I'm aware of, probably more happened, but that I'm aware of. Two things happened. One was internally, it was a trigger for me, small T trigger, that I was like, oh shit. Oh no, she's doesn't like it. She's nervous. Oh my God. So I went into that reaction. And then the other part of me was the caretaker part. Like you just said, I was like, what can I do? What can I do? What can I do?
Yeah.
How do I, quote, make her comfortable, make her happy, make her whatever? Oh my God. And so there were those things, which are probably very intertwined. They're obviously intertwined, but like, I know, and this happened months ago. This wasn't even yesterday. And I can remember it vividly.
Yeah.
Because I was like, I didn't know what to do. My mindset was, I don't know what to do for her.
Yes.
And
interestingly, that pressure is what she feels from you, but she doesn't know any of the meaning that we're talking about behind the pressure right now.
Yeah.
So she just feels pressure coming from you, even though it's pressure to take care of her. And all she can feel is pressure and something's wrong. Like there's a need, you have a need. Then she's going, well, what's our need? I don't know what the need is.
Right.
So that's where the we part. So it's how am I? How are you? How are we? Because if I'm over focused on you, I'm putting pressure on the relationship that's then going to impact your nervous system.
And even in this moment, as you're talking through it, I'm thinking like, tell me what to do. Tell me what I should have done. We want it to be so prescriptive, right? We want it because we want so badly in our hearts to do the best for all of our mammals, kids, horses, dogs, fish, whatever. We want to do the best thing. And so I hear so many times from my clients and be like, just tell me what to do. Just tell me what to do. And they're like, I'll do anything.
I have an answer.
Oh, good.
They just want us to be.
That's so hard.
I know.
Why is that so hard? I guess it's programming. Like,
yeah, I mean, there's a lot of socialized self that's about like being performative and like, and achievement and trying and doing as a way of being worthy of relationship. Mm-hmm. And we don't do a lot of just being together. And I really realized, when I bought my ranch and I ended up, building a herd of horses, essentially what I didn't mean to, but I did. And then I also didn't mean to do this, but I spent a lot of time in between my daily activities going out with the herd. And it was how I settled into myself throughout the day. I would go and spend 10 minutes with them, 15 minutes, an hour, and just graze with them. They're just foraging together.
Right. And
sometimes they're playing and sometimes they're grooming and sometimes they're napping and sometimes they're eating and sometimes they're, there's activities happening, but essentially they're existing together and just caring about each other and themselves. And that's all anyone ever really wants from us.
So how do we bring that to that competitive morning?
Well, I think that, it's like, how can I go into this with a commitment to take care of myself? Mm-hmm. So that my dog and I, or my dogs and I, can read signals from each other that we're going to care for each other. But I'm also going to go into that environment as a human who is there to offer that as well. And I think in a competitive environment, we see everybody as like the enemy because we want to win. Mm-hmm. But then we're not really ever in a state of ease because we might have people we're meeting there that are our friends, but like you really want to make sure that you've shown up somewhere where like you've had some interactions where you feel safe enough relationally, like psychologically, that you're that part of you can rest as well, where you're like, it's safe for me to just be. If all shit were to go down, there's someone here that I feel safe with.
Yeah. Interesting.
And I've offered that too. I've been a friendly other to the other people here. I mean, at the end of the day, you're competing with dogs. I mean, it's not
Right.
war, right? It's
Right.
okay.
Right.
And these are usually people
Yes.
you've seen at other events. It's okay to
Absolutely.
be friendly, and that
Yeah.
it's your community. So
Right.
act like it, use it, right? Like, do
Mm-hmm.
we actually settle into our community when we go to a dog show? Probably not.
Hardly. Right.
Yeah, but like that, it's supposed to be fun.
Right.
I
It
think
is.
it's supposed to be
That's
fun.
originally why we sent the check-in. Yeah. Uh-huh.
I mean, yeah, and it's supposed to be like, how can we learn from each other and how can I have a good day? And I want to be able to just be and offer that to others. And you'd be amazed at of how valuable that is to others. Like,
Yeah.
I offer a space for people to come sit next to me and just be. That's enough. We're just
Right.
going to be.
And
And
do you do that? Do you feel you do that through your energy or through your words? Both probably, but like
both
how do
in
you
my
verbalize
mind. I
that?
mean, it's like
Yeah.
I'm visualizing, like that's what I have to offer the world is to be a herd member or a pack member that is calm and alert and kind and trying to get along. My intent is to get along, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to take care of myself, and I'm going to do my best to listen to the needs of others. I'm just going to be like an attentive person in the world. And so that's my commitment
Mm-hmm.
and my mindset. And when I notice my thoughts going otherwise, which, I mean, they can get really ugly about humanity, you see people
Sure.
behaving poorly and like you can
Yep.
get sucked into that. But I'm like, but that's not
Mm-hmm.
that's not my purpose. My purpose
Right.
is to be an island of something else to offer. Like, that's the life raft I'm on. And so, yeah, then I'm like, how can I keep that going within myself? And if I notice I'm feeling irritated, aggravated, negative, then I need to take care of that so that I can continue to offer that to others. I want to feel that my level of stress is going to directly impact my health. So if I'm in a state of ease, that's good for me and it's good for
Yeah.
others.
Yeah.
And I will allow myself to that energy to go up if needed, but I'm going to conserve it when it's not needed.
So I love that. And one of the things that's coming to mind is that, so for most competitions, we are able to qualify or queue my business, but
Yeah.
like, or queue without anybody else losing. Do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
we all can get, like, we don't have to place or whatever. We can just qualify. We're working on our own goals. And so I always say there's enough green ribbons for everybody. Like
Yeah.
there's enough to go around there. Um, and so a lot of times we're not really competing, but one of the all way too common, and this blew Lizzie's brain, our mutual friend, this
Yeah.
blew her brain. But every once in a while, or too often, you'll get either unsolicited advice or people being like downright nasty
Oh, yeah.
for whatever reason. And so there literally was someone I was talking to in a seminar recently who said she stopped competing because she doesn't want to go to these places. She wants to compete. She wants to take her dog. She wants to be in these environments. She wants to do this, but it's the other people. So how do you like wander into those places and be like radically self-care and take care of yourself, but then also you're putting yourself in an environment that could be icky?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's people everywhere in the world that are going to have negative attitudes and be more competitive than they are collaborative. And it's really good practice to learn like some internal boundaries around like not letting that get to us, not taking it personally, not getting
Yeah.
pulled into it, and then looking for and developing relationships, like getting really good at finding the people that are more like-minded with you and
Mm-hmm.
syncing up with them. And I mean, I can go into an environment like that, and now because of practicing this, it takes 10 minutes for me to find my people. Or I'm
Nice.
like, oh, you're the people that are here to enjoy yourself
Yeah.
and learn. Like you have an open mind. And I'm like, I feel safer
Well, and I don't even feel like I have to go
psychologically.
talk to them right away. I just need
No,
to know they're there.
exactly. So when I'm settling in a new environment, that's what I'm looking for energetically. I'm paying attention behaviorally. I don't have to go meet them either, but I'm like, oh, I can pick up on who's closed off. There's like a closed gate where you're like, this person has a lot going on internally, pressure wise. And I'm not going near that because
Yep.
that's not how I want to feel.
Right.
Right. And
Yeah.
then picking up on like, oh, this is someone who is probably looking to have more ease in this experience and maybe more like-minded. And so I look for that everywhere I go as well. Our brain is doing it anyway, trying to identify sources of safety, others
Right.
as a resource in case we need, that's just part of our survival, is to go into an environment and very quickly try to find safe others. So
Well,
we
it's
may
interesting you say
look,
that because I
yeah,
always learned that it was about trying to identify the threats, like
that
that we're
too.
more threat focused than we are safety focused.
It's both.
Okay. All
I
right. Well,
mean,
I love that it's more safety focused because being threat focused is too negative, but
well, threat focused is safety focused, but I mean, the way that I was taught around the neuroscience is friend or foe.
mm-hmm.
And so that's both. It's both
Got it.
and.
Okay.
And so it's not one or
Got
the
it.
other. And our brain is scanning and looking for sources of threat, but it's also looking for, in the same way that, like, let's say the dog is chasing the cat, like the cat is aware of the dog as the source of a threat, but it's also looking for a tree.
Right. Okay. Got
And
it.
so we're looking for, like, what is the source of pressure to move away from, and where's the ease to run to? And
Yeah.
so that we're just not used to thinking that way. So we're like very focused on the negative versus
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
let
Yeah.
me look for the places where I can breathe. Where is
Right.
that? What's the place in the room that would feel right for my body to
Right.
set up where do I want my chair? Who looks friendly? Who looks
Yeah.
like they might be accepting? Like, what other dogs look that way? Like, that I might want to, like, I will be in a dog environment or horse environment, and I can very quickly think like, I'm going to go hang out near this group because
Mm-hmm.
they're a little more regulated.
Mm-hmm.
And then if I look around, I'm like, wow, no one is. What
Yeah.
do I do? Because if I alienate us, that's not good. Like, that's going to
Mm,
cause its own signal. So I'm like, all right, well,
interesting.
which is the least dysregulated of the
Yeah.
group? Where can I put
Well, yeah,
myself?
it's interesting because I've always been the like isolate person in that I always think that when in doubt, it's better for my dogs to be like near the door or by themselves or off to the side than it
Yeah,
is to be in an energy that I don't trust, right?
right.
And
And that's
but you're
probably
right, that sends
true.
another
Yeah.
signal.
It sends another signal, right? Right.
Yeah. Yeah, interesting. What about like confidence? There's a big discussion of in dog handlers about like, developing we talk about it again like we're in charge, right?
Yeah.
Like as if we could just wave a magic wand, which we can't. But like in developing confidence in our dogs. And I always try to remind people like if they're not confident in the ring, they're not confident somewhere else too. It's not just
Yeah.
in the ring, it's happening in other places. And I personally have this problem with one of my dogs who cannot perform the weave poles. We always joke in public, right? Because she's freaking brilliant, in the backyard and in class and all of those places, but she cannot do it at a trial. And now it is this compounding thing, right?
Yeah.
Because now it triggers me and now there's
Right.
that,
Right.
you know what I mean? Like now it
Yeah.
just like compounded interest
She's like,
basically on these
my
stupid
person's out in the
calls.
world saying that I can't do this, just so you know.
Right. 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 And so, but I know it's a confidence thing. I want her to enjoy myself. I'm trying to do different things, but like, how do we do that? Like, how do we support? Again, I know I'm coming from this place, so I'm already wrong in the question, but like coming from this place of like, I want to help fix it, which I know isn't perfect, but how do we get there?
Yeah. Well, instead of thinking of it as something that's wrong, what do you think the need is? What is she needing?
I think it's confident. I definitely have identified that it's confidence and pressure, right? Into
So that's
some,
a high pressure obstacle.
yes,
And so she's sensitive to pressure.
yes.
And so she needs experiences of being able to handle pressure in smaller doses
Mm-hmm.
so that she can learn that she can take on, like that she can learn to take care of herself around her sensitivity of pressure rather than like stuffing it, or that she needs to develop her own sense of mastery of pressure, but it needs to be in smaller steps. So like instead of, how many weave pulls are there in I can't remember.
12. Yeah,
12.
12.
You start with like 2 or 3.
Right.
It's like smaller steps toward, and doing it in places that are public that are not maybe a trial, like starting to like
Okay.
ease. It's like, what are the steps to take to help her feel like she's having some success? And takes some of it is about you. What are the steps that
Oh,
I can take
for
where I'm
sure.
like, I know that we can do this because it's just 3 pulls. And so,
Yeah.
and I'm here to help support her in this so that she can feel more confident. And then looking for other places where you see her confidence shaky and looking for opportunities to help her celebrate herself and have successes where she is, but it's sensitivity to pressure that is the problem, or not problem,
Okay.
but the
Right. Right.
source. Yeah. It's
Okay.
that, I shouldn't have said problem. It's really like completely against the way my model and how I think. It's actually her gift, but it's the
Oh,
fact that
right. The
she doesn't,
sensitivity.
yeah,
Yeah.
the sensitivity. And so and for you and your mindset, learning to like, this is going to be a good thing for her to have. We don't want it to go away. We want her to feel like she can take care of herself around pressure.
Yes. Yeah. I love that perspective. Yeah. It's a complete shift. Right.
Yeah. Instead of like, how do I shut it down and make it stop? It's like, well, how do I use it and use the sensitivity to pressure? And she, she's probably going to end up being like one of those perfectionist dogs that like
She
a lot.
is. Yeah. She
Okay.
is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because, and so the 12 polls is too much for her to do it perfectly. So she just shuts down. So it's like, all right, well then, the pressure is like, how can I help her learn something in smaller doses so that she can deal with the perfectionist part?
Got it. Yeah. 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 She is a perfectionist for sure. And
Yeah.
so what her answer is, if I can't do it right, I don't want to do it.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
So
kind of how
set
she
her up to
thinks.
be able to do it well in smaller doses and learning like, okay, you can do it. And it's just taking it in steps. She wants to
Yeah.
do it well all at once immediately. Like, and it's a very female mammal trait.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You'll see it a lot
Okay.
more with the female animals, the mares with the horses and the female dogs, way more. You'll see that trait.
Interesting. What
And it's
other things, whether, oh, go
yeah.
ahead.
Well, it's a huge source of very powerful leadership. It's not getting a handle on oneself, and then can lead to kind of a crisis of self. If, like she needs some space to develop that in herself and realize that she's hard on herself, essentially.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah. So we want to put her in situations where she doesn't have to be, and she can actually start to feel like she's coming into herself and doing little things successfully. And it'll go a long way. Like it'll go fast too. If you can switch gears and just start thinking about it like that, she'll start to feel on top of the world.
I love this. I think I'm going to listen to this section over and over again.
I have the opposite. I have a female puppy because I had a litter last year,
Oh,
and
okay.
I I had the mom and dad, and my experiment was, what if I have the litter of puppies and I don't interfere? What's the role that the dad plays in raising the litter? And so
Ooh,
and how
interesting.
long can I keep them together before all hell breaks loose? And like, what happens if I don't intervene with weaning or anything? I just let them raise the puppies. And so that's a whole other episode. But I the puppy that I ended up with, which is a whole other story, the one that I ended up with because my daughter picked the puppy, and
I see.
I thought I was going to keep two, and my
Okay.
daughter picked one and I picked one, and I was like, there's no way I can raise two puppies
Two
properly.
puppies, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I know better. And so I'm like, and I can't take away my daughter's puppy. So I ended up with her pick of the litter instead of
I
mine.
see.
And she
Got
was
it.
right. She picked the best puppy. I was wrong. I didn't
Ah,
pick the right puppy for us.
funny.
But this puppy is the opposite with the confidence issue. She almost has too much. She's
Interesting.
larger. Yeah, she's like large and in charge. And I'm like, no, 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 no,
And do you think that
no.
is because of how you raised them or your great experiment, or no? You just think that's how she was
Yeah,
going to be?
I think it's her temperament, but
Yeah.
I also think it's how she was raised, and it's the parents she has. It's all the
So
factors.
is
But
she in charge now in the house, even though she's a baby?
no, I'm in charge. No,
But is
no,
she in charge of the
the pack.
pack?
No, I'm not letting her.
No. Okay.
No, she will eventually rise
Yeah.
to leadership, but she's not ready. So
Yeah.
I have to really, she would be a very dangerous puppy in the wrong hands, because she's like, yeah, I mean, I cannot believe some of the stuff that she does. I'm like, where is this even coming from? She's like, I got this. I'm like, you don't.
You don't got this. Yeah.
But you'll see kids like that, and it's beautiful, and
Yes.
I don't want to
Right.
squash it, but it's like,
Right.
I don't want to kill the confidence, but I also like, you need to check yourself. You have a lot to learn. And
Right.
about being a benevolent leader, you are not a tyrant. You don't get to rule the world. You are not in charge of, it would be very unsafe for her. So,
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I just lost my benevolent leader. And so I have two now, and
sorry.
I know, thank you. And I know that the my one thinks she could be, but then also at some level knows I don't really want that
Yeah,
responsibility.
right.
And then the boy is the younger. I mean, they're both mature, but the boy is a little bit younger, and he's gonna end up, he like doesn't want it, but he knows it's his, kind of thing. And
Yeah.
so it's an interesting dynamic. And I'm on puppy lists, as many of us have to do that. And it'll be interesting to see what energy comes in, if that's the energy, the leader, the future leader,
Right.
because these two are kind of like, I mean, do you want it? I don't really want it. Do you
Yeah.
want it? I don't. Okay, well,
Well,
fine.
that's what this puppy is like, wants to take over leading her parents. And
Mm,
actually, she's got more leadership. She has more boldness and confidence than both of them, but
interesting.
not the
Yeah.
benevolence. And so you don't get to have the boldness without the benevolence. It's not safe.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting too, the different styles I think that dogs have in leadership positions, right? The girl that I just lost was so quiet that you didn't really even like see her signals barely.
Yeah.
But I would take her to new places or new packs, or where like to a friend's house where they had dogs. And all of a sudden you just saw them shift around her,
Yeah.
and she didn't do anything. She was like girl next door, sweet, from a human perspective, like you could barely see anything quote happen, but all of a sudden that what you could see was the other dog's response to her.
This just goes back to, what is it that we're supposed to do? And what is it that she offered, which was a state of ease and taking care of
Yeah.
herself and her own nervous system so that others could relax around her. So she was
Yeah.
aware and calm, and that felt good to be around.
Yeah.
And so it's not that she wasn't doing anything, it's that she was doing everything.
Right. Yeah. And she
Everything that
was.
matters.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's
Interesting.
very hard to lose those presences in our lives, because whether they're human or horse or dog or cat or whatever it is, because they offer us a place to just be as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
As humans.
True.
And
Yeah.
I have my 15-year-old border collie is you know, really aging. And he's been that for me
Yeah.
his whole life. And he has some dementia. So he doesn't have as much ease as he used to. He's
Right.
agitated. And it's like, I've
Oh,
lost that. And
yeah.
that presence that he offered, he doesn't
Yeah.
have it anymore. And it's, you can
Oof.
feel it. Yeah. It's
That's
really,
hard. I'm sorry.
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, okay. So that we don't both end up crying, or at least me.
I know.
Since you have been in competitive environments before, what is a couple things that you wish you could tell people that you see? Because I know that you've observed things and you've been like, oh my, I could fix that, or I could help you with that. Like, is there some
Yeah.
things that you wish we all knew?
Well, it's really interesting in the sheep herding world. My trainer really likes to switch the dogs to training on the whistle away from
Okay.
voice quickly, because he says that you can't really communicate our emotion through the whistle
Yeah,
the
it's
way
more
that
honest, I guess.
it's
Yeah.
just clean communication. And I
Yeah.
would say our emotional reactivity as humans, and how dysregulated we are and we don't realize it, and how much we're communicating that to our animals and to each other, our like that frustration level or pressure
Hmm.
that we're putting on ourselves and how much we're putting that into the environment, I think is
Yeah.
really the most important lesson here, is like, what am I putting out into the environment? And whether it's to my dog or to other handlers or to other dogs, or just to the system that we're in that day. And, you know, how is there a way for me to stay calm, alert, responsive without getting into reactivity, and learning the difference where I can modulate that?
Yeah.
So I'm dealing with pressure and I'm keeping the pressure on, but I've not flooded the system. And what I see most of all is just humans flooding their own
Flooding.
system. Yeah, their dog
Yeah.
system, the whole environment that we're all sharing with how they're acting, how they're communicating, but it's
Right.
coming from within. Yeah.
So I can hear like the response, because it's in my own mind too. I tell people a lot, it's kind of like a puppy. If you don't want them to chew on the shoe, you take the shoe away, but you replace it, because you can't just say don't do something. You have to actually give them something to do. And it seems to be an analogy most of us understand.
Yeah.
So in that moment when you're saying, don't be dysregulated, don't be, I don't want to be this person, I don't want to be overstressed, I don't want to flood. What is it that we should be doing? Is it literally just calming, soothing
Yeah.
things? Like, what, give us something to do.
Well, I think that to start, like, do we even know what it's like when we are flooded? So first we have to get to
Mm.
know our own
Mhm.
reactivity system to know what it feels like when we are,
Yeah.
and then learning, like, what does it take for me to dial that back? And so if you were to go into a show environment, and let's say you're like, I'm just going to work on this for a while. And so the results might be that I'm not going to do as well because I'm trying to figure this out.
Exactly.
And
Yep.
so, but I'm going to focus on learning to take care of myself in this environment. And so what are the signs? What are my signs? Like, my neck gets prickly. My voice raises, my tone changes, my dog starts to act this way. So I'm going to look for those signs. And when those happen, I start to practice things like I stop and take 3 deep breaths. I have like something in my pocket, like a stress ball, or,
Okay.
I
Yep.
have things that I've decided, like, well, how do I soothe myself? Or I have like a mantra I've created that's like, we're having fun, Beth. Like, this is, I'm
Yeah.
here to have fun. Or I have an accountability partner who, I'm going to work on it with a coach around, noticing when I've kind of flipped my lid and I start to get flooded. Somebody's going to help me, like, dial it back. Hey, pause. All right, there it is. Like, we're just looking for where it's gone over energetically, into
Got it.
over pressure, so I can dial it back a little bit. And so a commitment to work on that and get to know it goes a long way. It's just, awareness is a huge part of it, because as soon
Yeah.
as you are aware, you're like, okay, what I'm just going to ask myself and try to stay aware of what's happening within me for a while. And when I notice I've gotten triggered, I'm just going to dial it back and take some breaths, slow down, stop if I have to. And I'm going to practice doing that even when I'm training, because it happens when people are training.
Exactly. Yeah. I think that's really helpful that you're saying that, right? Is that, okay, well, if this should happen, this is going to be my response. This is what I'm going to do. And to visualize it and plan for it.
Yeah.
Right.
And practice that plan while you're training. I mean, I can be out in a training environment. There's no one there. Right. And it happens to me. There's no competition. Like, I don't even compete anymore. So it's just me and my dogs. There's no agenda. There's no, like, nothing matters. So why am I yelling at them? Like,
right. And
why have I raised my voice? I have no idea why I have done that. Like nothing matters right now.
Yeah.
So
interesting.
So practicing it in a place where you can work on that part of yourself. It's really about, I'm going to stop training my dog. I'm going to train myself in a dog training environment.
Yeah, because honestly, and this is what conversation I get into all the time, the dog skills are easy. That's literally the easiest part of it all.
Absolutely. You've got these great, talented animals. They want to partner with us. It's the human element that's.
Yeah. Well, this has been phenomenal. I could talk all day, but I won't do that to you. Thank you so very much for this. This is just a treat for us. And I will have the link in the show notes and all that good stuff so everybody can go buy the book and hear more from you. So thank you
I'm
so
happy
much.
to be back anytime if you ever want to talk about dogs. It's one of my favorite topics. So happy to do so.
We'll take you up on that.
Thank you. All right. Thanks.
Thanks so much for listening to the Mindset Coaching for Handlers podcast with me, Julie Bacon. I am so grateful for your precious time. Check out my Dogged Planner workbook and journal available on Amazon. Just search for Dogged Planner. I also offer monthly membership that's perfect for ongoing support of your awesome goals. Check out theqcoach.com for details, or just stop by and check out all the ways you can work on your mindset. And be sure to follow me on Facebook and Instagram at theqcoach and let me know how it's going. Finally, please share, subscribe, and leave a review. This helps us podcasters tremendously. Plus, I know I get my best podcast recommendations from friends. Thanks, and have a great week with your dogs.